the winged victory came to the Louvre in pieces, and people still line up to see her.
It just takes a beloved movie and makes it much more boring and much less realistic. The movie is really, really bad.
She refused to keep her fat mouth shut. Their star, Rachel Zegler, was so unlikable. It really does seem to me that this is like a 19-year-old's version of feminism.
Snow White's live-action remake was supposed to be a fairy tale revival that captured the same timeless wonder of the 1937 classic, but somewhere along the way, things went sideways. Audiences got curious the moment Disney announced a new version of its oldest princess story. After all, this was the film that launched the entire Disney empire. At first, the buzz was nothing but excitement. Fans wondered how the creative team would update the plot, who would be cast, and what unexpected twists might breathe new life into a classic so beloved for almost a century. That optimism, however, quickly morphed into concern when rumors leaked about production headaches, reshoots, and troubled relationships on set. One name at the center of it all is Rachel Zegler, the rising star tapped to play Snow White. A choice that, at first, seemed like a clever blend of fresh talent and Disney tradition. But then, everything got complicated. From early on, Rachel Zegler made a series of comments about the original 1937 Snow White film that struck many fans as dismissive or even condescending. She described the animated classic as outdated and implied she found it lacking in modern female empowerment. While reimagining a classic isn't new for Disney, it was the tone of her remarks that rubbed people the wrong way. Viewers who adored Snow White's gentle optimism and pioneering place in animation felt personally insulted, and the backlash online was fierce. The more Zegler tried to explain her viewpoints, the more she seemed to inflame the situation, leading to accusations that she was disrespecting the legacy of Walt Disney's first princess. Soon, fans were trending hashtags calling for recasting, or at least demanding a more careful approach from the star herself. Meanwhile, Disney executives were stuck in an increasingly uncomfortable position. They'd bet big on Rachel Z to carry their next blockbuster, only to see her public persona embroiled in controversy. Instead of generating hype, the star of the movie was fueling skepticism. Behind the scenes, the problems went far beyond public perception. Disney was reportedly planning a straightforward shoot that would wrap efficiently, but insiders now claim there were no fewer than 3 major rounds of reshoots. Each time the production returned to set, everyone hoped this would be the last fix. Yet each time, a new problem arose. In some cases, it was pacing. Early cuts were said to drag in the middle or rush important moments near the climax. In other instances, the storyline itself wasn't hitting the right emotional beats, especially since Greta Gerwig, brought in to add depth to the script, found herself juggling different directives from multiple executives. Some wanted a more faithful retelling, while others pushed to distance Snow White from the older version entirely. Naturally, the crew and cast were caught in the crossfire. Morale dipped when it became clear this project would cost far more time and resources than originally expected. All of that behind-the-scenes tension might have stayed out of public view had the cast maintained a united front. But when rumors spread about clashes between Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot, who plays the evil queen, curiosity soared. Gal Gadot is known for her warm but strong on-screen presence, and for being easy to work with, so the idea that she and her co-star might be at odds felt surprising to many. Yet reports surfaced about a fortress scene meant to be a centerpiece for the film's final act. Supposedly, it required a massive set, elaborate effects, and an intense confrontation between Snow White and the evil queen. According to those on set, the tension got so thick that filming the scene became a nightmare. Zegler felt overshadowed by Gadot's improvised additions to the Queen's dialogue, while Gadot and some of the creative team loved the darker, more mature edge this added to the villain. Multiple takes, some claim as many as 25, were scrapped because of constant interruptions or disagreements. People who were there describe it as an endless loop of frustration, with neither side willing to compromise in real time. Ultimately, the footage proved nearly unusable, and that entire sequence was cut out of the final version, costing Disney a fortune and leaving the cast and crew drained and disappointed. In the midst of this chaos, Rachel Zegler's controversy regarding her stance on the 1937 Snow White continued to mount. Online commentators dug up more of her interviews and tweets, some from previous projects, to argue she had a pattern of sounding condescending toward older material or fan-favorite stories. Whether or not that was truly the case, the narrative took off. Rachel Zegler hates the classics. Suddenly, the big question wasn't whether the live-action Snow White would be a success, it was whether Disney would cut its losses and push the release date. In an industry where timing often determines a film's profitability, postponing a major picture is never done lightly. Yet that's exactly what happened. Executives decided to delay the film from 2024 to 2025, hoping that extra breathing room could salvage what felt like a sinking ship. From the outside, it was clear that the enormous budget devoted to reshoots and editing had already spiraled. Now, the studio faced a new problem: how to promote a film whose star was embroiled in heated debates with a passionate fan base. At some point, someone must have convinced Rachel Zegler, or perhaps she decided herself, to try an apology. She issued a statement aimed at fans of the original, insisting she never meant to disrespect the 1937 movie or Snow White's place in cinematic history. On the surface, it looked like an attempt to calm the waters, show contrition, reset the conversation, and maybe steer the hype in a positive direction. But for many fans, it seemed calculated rather than heartfelt, just more spin to protect the film's shaky public image. Commenters on social media criticized the apology's timing, pointing out it arrived only after the negative press grew. Impossible to ignore. Others noted her initial remarks were hardly the only source of tension. Reshoot chaos, rumored spats with co-stars, and ballooning production costs were overshadowing everything. Even if her apology helped a little, the question remained whether it could undo the damage or soften the frustration building among Disney loyalists who hold the original Snow White close to their hearts. Complicating matters further was the fact that Gal Gadot herself seemed lukewarm about certain aspects of the production. Though known for her diplomacy, some people close to the set claimed that Gadot had her own ideas about the Evil Queen's motivations, wanting to bring more nuance and darkness than a cartoonish villain might typically display. In a vacuum, that's not a bad thing. It can add depth to a classic story. However, tension between performers arises when creative decisions aren't aligned. With Rachel Zegler already feeling the pressure, Gadot's improvised lines added friction during the fortress sequence. When you've got multiple star personalities in a big-budget setting, every single difference in creative vision can explode into a major ordeal. Once the scene was finally deemed unworkable and left on the cutting room floor, everyone felt the sting of wasted time and missed opportunities. The fortress scene had been pitched as a game changer for the film's climax, a moment that would catapult the story into a more intense, gripping finale. In the end, not only did it fail to materialize, it also symbolized how messy things had become. Disney evidently tried to maintain public silence about the specifics of these production troubles, but the internet thrives on rumors, and each new piece of information fueled the narrative that this Snow White was in serious jeopardy. Bloggers and film analysts speculated whether Disney might consider pulling the film altogether or relegating it to Disney Plus after a minimal theatrical run. That might sound drastic, but some studios have shelved completed projects in the past when a release seemed too risky or harmful to brand identity. Whether that outcome was ever on the table for Snow White remains unclear, but the whispers alone show how uncertain everything became. Instead of focusing on the film's updated storyline or magical atmosphere, the conversation revolved around cost overruns, off-script interviews, and cast rivalries. By the time Rachel Zegler issued her apology, it felt like part of a bigger scramble to shift public perception. She emphasized that the original Snow White had historical significance and claimed she never intended to demean it. Skeptics, however, pointed out that her earlier interviews explicitly referred to finding the original cartoon frightening or lacking strong female representation, statements that made fans believe she was dismissing the fairy tale roots. This dilemma, the actress wanting to modernize a classic but inadvertently alienating the existing fan base, highlighted a broader question about Disney's live-action remakes. Where do you draw the line between updating a story for new audiences and preserving what made it iconic in the first place? Meanwhile, marketing experts grew increasingly concerned about how to promote a film dominated by negative headlines. The simplest approach would have been a united front at premieres and press junkets, with Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot smiling side by side, reaffirming that everything was fine. But scheduling interviews for them together risked meltdown moments if reporters asked about the rumored friction or brought up Zegler's apology. Rumors circulated that Gadot herself was unhappy enough to consider limiting joint appearances. She preferred to let her work speak for itself. Disney reportedly canceled or scaled down international premieres, including a major UK event, partly to avoid a press circus that would overshadow any positive aspects of the movie. In the background, numerous crew members, cinematographers, costume designers, effects artists were pouring heart and soul into building the movie's look and feel. Some of them hoped that viewers, once they finally see the cinematic spectacle, would be so drawn in by the visuals and fresh spins on beloved characters that the controversies might fade. Others worried that no amount of post-production polish could distract audiences from the overshadowing negativity. If the final movie is inconsistent in tone or structure because of repeated reshoots, viewers might notice, and critics will likely jump all over it, referencing the behind-the-scenes strife as the explanation for any shortcomings. Disney eventually found itself weighing how to position the film's story. Should the marketing emphasize Snow White's renewed sense of empowerment and leadership, or stick to a more traditional fantasy vibe? After all, the complaints about modernizing the character partly drove the backlash in the first place. Some fans want to see the classic story nearly intact, while others celebrate progress and new interpretations. It's a tough balance, and Rachel Zegler's apology, while possibly a step toward mending fences with traditionalists, may not fully reconcile these two camps. The final script and on-screen result will have to speak for itself, showing whether the filmmakers found that sweet spot of respect for tradition while also exploring themes relevant to a 21st century audience. The fact that the film's release was pushed to 2025 gave Disney extra time for strategic damage control. But an extended delay can also be a double-edged sword. It draws out the controversies, leaving the film's reputation in limbo. Early now, 2024 might have allowed the movie to come and go swiftly, but 2025 means we'll hear about it for another year, good or bad. For Rachel Zegler herself, the next year could be crucial for her career. She came onto the scene with a meteoric rise, a Spielberg film, then a major Disney princess role. But if Snow White stumbles due to controversies or underperforms at the box office, it could sour studios on the idea of entrusting her with huge projects again, especially if they fear her outspoken nature might overshadow the movie itself. On the other hand, if the film somehow turns out to be engaging and cohesive, this entire saga might be remembered as a rocky start rather than a career ender. Then there's Gal Gadot, whose more established star status might shield her from long-term damage. Even if this film fails to meet expectations, she has a track record of box office hits, which means it's less risky to hire her for future roles. Still, some watchers think the behind-the-scenes quarrels might dent her pristine public image. In Hollywood, reputations are fragile, and large-scale disputes can leave scars, especially if they turn into cautionary tales. Many are already calling the production a lesson in how not to manage a classic IP. Social media debates swirl around whether Disney pushed a modern Snow White too far, ignoring the magic that made the original endure for generations. Others blame the cast for not uniting behind a common vision. Ultimately, everyone involved could have handled things differently, from limiting provocative sound bites to streamlining script revisions before filming, so the cast wasn't forced into repeated rewrites on set. With each passing month, fans dissect every update, rumor, or statement. Will the reworked third act be an improvement or just a patch job? How much of the Evil Queen storyline survived those major cuts? And does Rachel Zegler's reimagined Snow White come across as believably heroic, or does the film sideline her too much in favor of a stronger villain? In normal circumstances, audiences would have to wait until opening night to discover those answers firsthand. But these are not normal circumstances. The controversies and speculations almost feel like a separate narrative, playing out in real time before the cameras ever roll in a theater. When the movie does finally premiere, people will sit down with all this behind-the-scenes drama in mind. Some might be willing to look past it if the film genuinely entertains or stirs nostalgia. Others could be unable to separate the controversies from what they see on screen. Every line or scene might be mentally compared to what was rumored or cut. In that sense, the apology from Rachel Zegler could seem like a footnote. Even if her on-screen performance is excellent, there's a chance that certain viewers will have already made up their minds. That's the risk a studio takes when a production grows bigger than the film itself, when the story behind the scenes is more compelling or more provocative than what ends up in the final product. Disney's hope, of course, is that once the AIM movie is out, the narrative will shift to box office figures and reviews. If critics praise the film's new approach to Snow White and commend the acting, all the chaos might be framed as worth it in the end. Media headlines can change overnight if the audience embraces the adaptation. There's even a possibility that, with the right spin, the fortress scene fiasco and other hiccups become behind-the-scenes tidbits fans talk about with amusement rather than bitterness. The bigger danger is if the film stumbles commercially, especially with a star at the center who's been polarizing the target audience for months. If that happens, many will inevitably say the early controversies and repeated reshoots set the production on a doomed path from the start. All told, Snow White 2025 stands at a precarious crossroads. It was meant to be a crown jewel in Disney's ongoing series of live-action remakes, a testament to how a classic can be reinvigorated. Instead, it became a swirling storm of budget overruns, public fallouts, canceled premieres, alleged star feuds, and an actress's half-welcome apology to fans who cherished the original. If it somehow manages to triumph, it could become a testament to perseverance, proving that even when external chaos reigns, creativity can still produce memorable cinema. But if it underperforms, fans and industry insiders alike will likely remember it as a cautionary tale, how one of the biggest names in entertainment nearly torpedoed its most iconic princess by underestimating just how loyal people still are to the core values of classic fairy tales. For now, all we can do is wait and see how audiences react once the film finally arrives in theaters. Will the final cut reward patient fans with a mesmerizing story that respects its roots while introducing fresh perspectives? Or will the controversies overshadow everything the creative team worked so hard to accomplish? That answer will shape not just Rachel Zegler's Hollywood future, but also how Disney approaches future reimaginings of its cherished properties. One thing is certain, Snow White's journey from the page to the screen has never seen drama quite like this before, and its eventual reception, good or bad, will be talked about for a long time. Whether Rachel Zegler's apology is remembered as a turning point or just another chapter in a tumultuous saga is up to the audiences who buy tickets, watch the movie, and ultimately decide whether this updated Snow White was worth the ride. Still, hungry for more drama? Give this video a thumbs up and join the conversation below. Do you think this Snow White reboot is doomed from the start? Or can controversy spark a surprise comeback? Subscribe now to catch our next deep dive, because once you go behind the curtain, there's no turning back.